welcome to the deep dive.
Good to be here.
Okay, so quite a bit happening today. We've picked out five really key breaking news stories that you need to know about.
Yeah, things are moving fast. We've dug into the reports to try and, bring you the essential details.
Exactly. Not just the headlines, but what's really going on underneath.
Let's get right into it then.
All right, first up, major changes reported at the National Security Council. This involves President Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio.
Yes, the headline grabber here is that apparently over 100 NSC staff members were told they were being terminated. This happened last Friday.
Wow, over 100. And the context is the NSC had, what, ballooned to over 300 people into the Biden administration?
That's the number being reported, yes.
Yeah.
So the goal seems to be a pretty drastic reduction, maybe down to just a few dozen.
That's a huge cut. What's the reasoning being given?
Well, there's a quote from a White House official that's quite direct. They described it as going after the deep state.
The deep state.
Okay. The quote was, "The NSC is the ultimate deep state. It's Marco versus the deep state. We're gutting the deep state."
That's very strong language. It definitely sets a tone.
It really does. That term deep state, it suggests this idea of, embedded opposition within the government bureaucracy. Using it here signals a pretty confrontational approach to reshaping the NSC.
So it's not just about numbers. It's about changing how it functions or who functions within it.
Seems like it. And there are operational changes possibly coming too.
Like what?
Axios is reporting that some of the tasks the NSC used to handle might get shifted over to the State Department or the Defense Department.
Interesting. So kind of decentralizing some of that power away from the NSC itself.
Potentially, yes, reducing its direct operational footprint.
We do have an official statement from Secretary Rubio, who's also the acting national security advisor right now.
What did he say?
He framed it more in terms of efficiency, saying the right sizing of the NSC is in line with its original purpose and the president's vision, and that it'll be better positioned to collaborate with agencies.
Okay, so that's the official line. Efficiency, collaboration, back to its roots. A bit different from the gutting the deep state quote.
Definitely a different emphasis. Another senior White House official apparently criticized the old way, calling it a bottom-to-the-top approach.
Suggesting the NSC got too involved in actually doing policy, not just advising or coordinating.
Exactly. The new model is supposed to be more like what the president wants, get it done. Much more top-down, streamlined.
Makes sense in that context. And Rubio's still in charge, with Andy Baker and Robert Gabriel as his deputies.
That's the current leadership structure, yes.
And it's worth remembering this isn't happening in a vacuum, right? There were those firings at the National Intelligence Council under D.N.I. Gabbard recently.
Good point. So it potentially points to a broader pattern across the national security apparatus.
Could be. Trying to get everyone aligned with the administration's agenda, speaking with one voice, as they say.
Okay, let's pivot now. A really big story impacting environmental policy and the auto market coming out of California.
Yes, the second one. Congress has stepped in and overturned California's plan to ban the sale of new gas cars by 2035.
And this is huge because it wasn't just California, right? A bunch of other states follow California's lead on emissions.
That's the key thing. 11 other states plus D.C. had adopted California's standards. That represents, something like 40% of the entire U.S. car market? So this decision has massive ripple effect.
40%, wow. And the bill passed both the House and Senate.
It did. Now it's heading to President Trump, and it's expected he'll sign it.
But is it a done deal? I heard something about a potential legal challenge.
There might be, yeah. Apparently, the Senate parliamentarian, the person who advises on Senate rules, questioned whether Congress actually has the authority to overturn this specific EPA waiver using this particular method.
Okay, so why is that waiver so important?
Well, California has this unique authority, even older than the EPA itself, to set its own stricter air quality rules. But for each new rule, like this gas car ban, they need a waiver from the EPA.
And they got this waiver near the end of the Biden administration?
Correct. So the legal fight will probably be about whether Congress can use the Congressional Review Act, that's the tool they used here, to nullify that specific state waiver granted by the EPA. It's legally complex.
And California isn't taking this lying down.
Not at all. Attorney General Rob Bonta has already said they're suing the Trump administration over this, arguing it's an unlawful use of that Congressional Review Act.
We've seen this movie before, haven't we? Clashes over California's emissions rule.
We have. The previous Trump administration also tried to revoke a California waiver, leading to court battles. It's this recurring tension, state versus federal power on environmental policy.
Let's just remind ourselves what the California rule actually required. It wasn't an immediate ban, right?
No, it was phased. The first big target was for the 2026 model year, 35% of new cars sold had to be zero-emission vehicles, or ZEVs. That included plug-in hybrids, too.
35% by 2026. But are consumers even buying EVs at that rate? I saw some reports suggesting ZEV sales might have dipped recently in California.
That's an interesting data point, yeah. It raises questions about consumer demand meeting these mandates. And automakers certainly had concerns.
Like Toyota.
Right. Toyota called that 2026 requirement impossible to meet. Car makers were looking at possibly not having enough compliant cars, having to buy expensive credits, or facing big fines.
And then there's the cost for regular people, concerns about used car prices going up and new EVs still being pretty expensive, over $700 a month for financing typically.
Affordability is a huge piece of the counterargument. A California state senator, Tony Strickland, welcomed the overturn, citing exactly those cost concerns, plus the strain on the state's power grid.
Ah, yes, the grid.
Yeah.
California has already had issues asking people not to charge their EVs during heat waves, right?
They have. And researchers at UC Berkeley estimated it would take something like $20 billion in grid upgrades to handle a full EV transition. So overturning this mandate definitely changes the calculation for infrastructure planning, too.
Lots of moving parts there. Okay, story number 3 takes us to the courts, specifically in Massachusetts.
Yes, this involves the Department of Education. A federal judge there has blocked the Trump administration's plan for mass layoffs at the department.
Blocked it, so a temporary halt.
An injunction, yes. Judge Myung J. John basically ruled that the department needs to be able to function as Congress intended when it was created.
And the ruling didn't just stop future layoffs.
No, it also apparently requires the rehiring of employees who were already fired under this plan. That's quite significant.
I bet the administration isn't happy about that.
Unsurprisingly, no. An education department spokesperson said they'll immediately challenge this on an emergency basis. So this legal fight is definitely not over.
Where did the original lawsuit come from?
It was filed by the state of New York and also the Somerville Public Schools in Massachusetts. They were challenging President Trump's executive order from back in March.
The order that aimed to close the department entirely.
That's the one. But the judge seems to have sided with the argument based on the law that actually created the Department of Education.
Which says?
Essentially that since Congress created the department, only Congress can close it through legislation, not the president via an executive order. It's about the separation of powers.
And how many jobs were we talking about?
Reports suggested over 2,000 employees had lost their jobs due to that executive order. So this injunction, for now, pauses that and keeps the department running.
A clear example of judicial review in action. Okay, let's circle back to California for our 4th story, the reaction to that EV mandate repeal.
Right. Governor Gavin Newsom is reportedly furious. He's vowing a big legal fight.
Furious. Yeah, that sounds about right given California's stance. What's his main argument?
He's saying the repeal is illegal, that it breaks decades of precedent. He's also pointing to rulings from the Government Accountability Office and that Senate parliamentarian opinion we mentioned earlier suggesting they support California's position.
So, doubling down on the legal arguments. The Senate vote itself was pretty close, wasn't it? 51-44.
It was. One Democrat sided with all the voting Republicans. It really highlights the partisan divide on this issue.
And they used the Congressional Review Act, which lets Congress undo recent regulations. But Newsom thinks it doesn't apply here.
That seems to be the core of his legal challenge, yes. That this specific type of EPA waiver isn't the kind of regulation the CRA was meant to cover.
He had a pretty punchy quote about it, too.
He did. He said the effort would make America smoggy again, clearly framing it as an environmental rollback.
And he and the Attorney General, Rob Bonta, have officially announced they are suing the Senate.
Yes, the lawsuit is moving forward. They're trying to block the repeal.
Meanwhile, President Trump is expected to sign the bill, views it as a win against EV mandates.
That's the expectation. It aligns with his campaign promises, where he warned about the impact of an all-electric push on auto workers and the industry.
Okay. One more story to cover, and it takes us back to the National Security Council shakeup. More details emerging.
Yes, our 5th story adds a bit more color to that NSC restructuring we started with. It reinforces this idea of targeting the so-called deep state.
How so?
Well, the number is still over 100 officials put on administrative leave, but now we're hearing it cuts across pretty much all the NSC directorates.
All of them. including key areas.
Apparently so, including those handling really critical issues like Ukraine, Iran, the Indo-Pacific. That suggests a very broad sweep.
And the timing was abrupt, you said.
Extremely. Reports from CNN and Reuters say staff got emails late Friday, just 30 minutes to clear their desks.
30 minutes, wow. That sends a message.
It certainly does. And that administration official repeated the goal: reduce bureaucracy, concentrate foreign policy decisions at the top, with Secretary Rubio central to it.
And they used that quote again.
They did. The NSC is the ultimate deep state. It's Marco versus the deep state. We're gutting the deep state. They're really hammering that message.
So the stated aim is to get the NSC back to just coordinating, not shaping policy itself.
Back to its original purpose, as they put it, more of a facilitator for the president and cabinet.
And that target staffing level is still around 50 people.
That's the number being reported, which, again, is a massive cut from over 300 under Biden and even fewer than during Trump's first term.
Are whole sections being eliminated?
There are reports, multiple sources, according to Reuters, that entire directorates might be cut or merged. Things like the Africa Policy Desk or the one coordinating with NATO.
That would be a fundamental change in how the NSC operates day-to-day on specific regions or issues.
Absolutely. And officials are apparently pointing to Trump's recent reversal of Syria sanctions as the model for how things should work now.
How so?
The quote was, "The president gave the order, the cabinet followed, no need for endless layers of committees. Very top-down, very direct."
Interesting. And this all happened right before Memorial Day weekend, affecting both career staff and political appointees.
Yes, that timing is notable. It hit both long-term officials and people brought in by the Trump administration itself.
Has the White House commented officially on these latest details?
Not publicly, no. Silence from the White House on these specific staffing moves so far.
And Rubio, Baker, and Gabriel are still expected to lead this leaner NSC going forward.
That seems to be the plan. And again, this follows the departure of the previous National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, a few weeks ago. So definitely a period of significant change there.
Whew. Okay, that's a lot. 5 major stories touching national security, environment, education, the courts. It really shows how much is in flux right now.
It certainly does. Each one of these has potentially big consequences down the road. We'll definitely need to keep watching how they develop.
Absolutely. It's a lot to absorb, but hopefully this deep dive gave you a clearer picture of what's happening and why it matters.
Stay informed, everyone. Think about how these different pieces connect.
Thank you for listening to The Patriot Report. For story ideas, please drop into the comments. Fade out.